Rocket ship, go now. Hello, I am Robert Ogilvy, Executive Strategist and EQ Coach. Glad you guys could join me again here today. Okay, so today's question, topic, issue. What are the things that block Agile from scaling? Are there particular things that seem to get in the way again and again? And I say again and again like we've been doing this for years, but actually notions of not just Agile, but scaling Agile to the whole big organization are relatively recent, the past 5 years or so. Now, pragmatically, you might say they've been around for a long time because in practice, what you realize is that Agile is so closely tied to process management and change management that's actually not new at all. But the popularity and really I would say the multi-sectorial, like everyone's doing it. This isn't just for IT anymore. It's for sales teams. It's for this sector. It's for that sector. It's for everywhere, and with good reason, right? So there's very few places that I would say don't ever try going Agile. It can benefit most places. But when you try to scale it to a whole organization, it hits a whole bunch of other problems, right? Which means that if you were to look for, pay dirt, proof positive, successful projects of large enterprise organizations that did a successful full-scale agile change, there's not a whole lot yet. There are some in process. There are some, would be somewhere in there. And again, if to say, pass fail is a rough way to do it. It's more like how successful was it, right? So I'll get into what these three things are, but first I actually want to recap a bit more about the different systems that are trying to crack this nut. Basically, the way I'm seeing it is that these three more fundamental keys, fundamental barriers you're trying to overcome are that the way the organization approaches business strategy, designing business products, and quickly trying to deploy them and test and get them out there needs to become way, way, way better. And I'm saying this one first because I actually think it is fundamentally the prime issue. I'll get more into that. Secondly, there's something around the coordination and support that needs to get much better about how this is going to happen because you can have individual teams doing their stuff really well, but you still need to have them working together, which is part of what that organization is, and that's not always well planned. And then the last piece is really that the way they're going to get from where they are now to there, the change management plan, the transition plan, that itself is a giant change management effort, and there's not just a right way to do that, but I would say a feasible way to approach that. Okay, so I'll go into each of these in a bit more detail. But let me just throw out some terms here. So you may have heard of Scaled Agile Framework, SAFe. There's a bunch of other ones in the past. They haven't caught on as much, like less, and I'm sure there's lots of other ones I'm missing. And then the other big one I will rightly inform you guys of is Disciplined Agile. Okay, so you might think, well, these are both systems about dealing with Agile at full organizational scale, right? They must be somewhat equal. Well, you know what? In theory, beyond saying I think disciplined agile has better theory on its side, it also seems to produce much better quality practitioners and is also the synthesis in that it's coming out of good project management work, which is now done agile habits very well. So it's coming out of more deeply practiced people and a more robust theory, which seems to be able to handle newbies and the learning curve of getting into it and the long-term customization so you can really make it fit your needs. Scaled Agile framework in theory is supposed to address those, but it doesn't seem to do them as well. But the real curse when you talk to people who practice Agile of why they hate SAFe, and some people will just say, SAFe is just the devil, or more importantly, the people who practice it, is because the rigor to which they have approached training and development, they have tried to make it this kind of generic Big Mac training that you can do, like honestly, rather quickly, right? And you're changing so many pieces of the organization and the business strategy and what teams are interoperating and just honestly everything, right? The amount of training and depth and expertise someone needs is actually quite high. And so by lowering that threshold bar, which you might think is good from a marketing standpoint that you can get out there and market, it's dropped the quality so much that it's actually kind of biting its own tail there, right? It's become self-destructive and it's proliferated quickly, but it hasn't proliferated well, right? So discipline agile really has, right? It takes a lot more effort to get. It takes a lot more practice, but more importantly, the results seem to speak for itself, and it also seems to be more able to customize in the mid and far ends to what the organization needs. What I particularly like about this approach is that Disciplined Agile seems to want to lay out a bunch of different processes and say, well, whether you're approaching this problem or that problem, here's a short list of ways you probably want to do it. But even more than that, there's one or two recommended ways, and you probably want to use those. And so if you're a newbie, if you're getting into the first time, that recommendation is super, super useful. It helps you, and particularly understanding why that they would say of these five technical approaches, we suggest this one or that one, right? Oh, that's good intel, right? But then on the far end, you might actually say, well, actually, no, we're going to switch this other one for good reason, for good evidence, for good, contextual, situational parameters, right? And it seems to be able to do that. And in fact, I would say one of the biggest feathers in the cap of Discipline Agile is that they were acquired in 2019 by PMI, again, the Global Project Management Institute, because they were doing such a good job of it, and because Agile is everywhere. So they've now woven this into project management habits, and Discipline Agile seems to just be more sensitive and able to do that. I'm not an expert in any of these, not yet. But what I was more interested in the business and process premises behind these, right? So I don't want to get too bogged down in the technical, but so let me try to recap these points. Again, the first point and probably the most important point is that, and it's something like this: the way that you think about business strategy and building business products needs to change. And what tends to actually reveal that is that, listen, you can get a few teams operationalizing well, you can get a lot of teams. And the more teams are doing that, the more great we can work in these sprints, we can be very productive and even reliable in how we're producing good work, but we're also kind of scratching more at the roots of the business premise of why we're doing this and revealing that it is not up to snuff. And so somewhere between it's outright bad to it's not moving fast enough and learning lessons fast enough, I think is the more Gen Pop problem of this, right? So I was looking at one talk and it was framing it as like, well, great, it's all good that you can work in these agile habits, but if it still takes you 9 or 12 months to even define what a product could be, and then it gets into its whole agile development and release kind of cycle of things, it's like, well, great, why did it take 9 or 12 months to get that far along? Couldn't that be brought way, way, way smaller? And so again, part of the lean business philosophy, this is where the lean part comes in, is that actually, isn't there something smaller and more iteratable that we could test, we get evidence on, and we could iterate from? Which is why adding value is important, because it becomes this pragmatic kind of pay dirt of like, forget what we think or conceive or the perspective that we're taking. The sooner we can start delivering people to not or realize that we're not delivering value, the sooner it kind of confirms and validates what we're doing and allows us to keep creeping and iterating in the right direction, right? And so then from a people standpoint, you can imagine if you have a lot of mid and upper managers, which are frankly out of practice and don't want to do that well, or authority wise don't want to have other people's input about how these business products could be adding value or what's a valuable thing worth making, that's pretty darn threatening, right? And anyway, I, I'm of the three, again, this business strategy piece as I actually think, the big critical one. It underscores how headless the organization is. And then I have 2 minutes to go through the other two. Um, the second part is that so a team in itself can work well, but there are still lots of functions that need to happen in an organization, and you need, on the people end, we'll call that coordination, and then on the IT, the data, and the everything else end, you could call that support, right? And that could mean that need to have access to the system tools you need. It might mean you need to be able to get budgets approved for the thing you want. It might mean that you need to be able to pull timely data when needed to be able to do your job well, or some efficient way that it goes from release to this to that. That's all coordination work. That's all support work that needs to happen, right? This is all very operational stuff. It's not like you would have 2 or 24 totally independent teams that actually wouldn't be an organization. They need to have a way to coordinate with each other, and that's really taking the basic 6 team conditions, the real team conditions, and kind of scaling that at an org level. It's like you need to interoperate with each other to add value, or else you're just in your own little unit, right? And then the last one is that they need a lot more effort on the transition plan, on the change management. In fact, of all the 3 areas of strategic management, strategic planning, innovation management, which is about good innovative products, or process management, change management, I actually think Agile at scale is closer to the change management end of things. In this sense, we're actually not talking about the ongoing lessons and improvement, but the transition of how you're going to get from where you are now to the full organizational uptake of this, right? So you want this Goldilocks zone that's somewhere in the middle. Remember, people can probably only change about 2 habits at a time, so you don't want to overwhelm people. And yet you also want people to know about the wins and be able to scale up um, bit by bit and see that this is accumulating into something greater than just the step-by-step pieces. I know I just threw a lot at you guys. I'll try to briefly recap that. Can full-scale agile work, whether it's disciplined agile or whatever your system you might be using? Yes, if you tackle the fundamental business strategy, quickly putting out business products and learning lessons on them, if you get really good at that, if you get good at the people coordination and all the different support functions, the IT, the data, the whatever else that needs to happen, and if you have a good middle ground of how to approach the transition plan of here to there. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you guys next time.